So, hi everyone. My name's David Putrino. I'm a physical therapist with a PhD in neuroscience. I currently hold a couple of positions. I direct a telemedicine department at a place called Burke Medical Research Institute, which is a wonderful research institute out in White Plains, New York, that is sort of bordered with a rehabilitation hospital. And so I get to sort of work out there with the patients and come up with new and exciting ways of treating them. And then I hold a faculty position at the Department of Rehabilitation Medicine at Cornell Medical College. So in terms of telemedicine, I've been starting to realize that absolutely no one really knows what I'm talking about when I say telemedicine. So we were running a survey on 100 patients, and 80% of them have never heard the word telemedicine, let alone sort of know what it is. And it's a pretty broad term. It can mean a lot of things. Telemedicine can be, currently the only thing you can actually bill for in telemedicine is a doctor calling a patient up on the phone and saying, how are you doing? So that's telemedicine in one sense. But it can also be a lot more innovative than that. So it can be using sensor technology to check a patient and check in on them, see how they're doing. It can be using other sorts of wearables and things like that to build video games to get people engaged in what they're doing, to educate people. So it's app development. It's a lot of different things to a lot of different people. But the main thing is the why. Why are we doing it? Because healthcare sucks. We're doing it because we need cheaper, more efficient, more effective solutions to delivering care to people. And we need them now. So to sort of give you an example of what we're dealing with in one small area. So this is one small area in healthcare, which is stroke. So here are a couple of just generic comments about stroke, which you can sort of Google and hear anywhere you look. Anywhere you look. But essentially, in the US, 800,000 people a year have a stroke. We've got about 7 million stroke survivors who are sitting at home receiving no care, who have been told, this is all we can do for you, and we're not going to pay you anymore. We're not going to pay for any more healthcare, and because of that, they're sort of racking up a bill of about $35 billion per year in costs of carers, in sort of lost productivity of their primary caregiver, and also age is a factor. And the reason we need to care about this is because we're an aging population. So, it's projected that by 2050, we're going to have not 8 million stroke patients sitting at home, but 16 million stroke patients sitting at home. And where telemedicine comes into this is we need to have more effective ways to deal with this problem. We need to have more effective and more efficient ways than, hey, everyone, come to one centralized hub for your care. That doesn't really work, especially when you think about, where I'm coming from, which is New York City, where building a hospital isn't really a feasible option either, unless you start building upwards. And so basically the bottom line is that we really need new ways of approaching this problem. And so I thought a bit about it. Last year I published a paper on, a review paper looking at, hey, can we use video games to actually deliver care to these people? And I know you all want to run out and read my paper, but spoiler alert here, it works. If you give people video games in place of their rehabilitation, if you replace coming into a centralized hub and paying a lot of money to staying at home and interacting with a device to do your exercises, it improves your outcome. Let's have a little bit of a talk about what treatment can look like, because again, telemedicine is a nebulous concept. It can mean a lot of things. So I wanted to show you a device called the Leap Motion. I'm sure many of you have heard about the Leap Motion. It was released about 1.5 years, 2 years ago as a hobbyist tool. No one really knew what to do with it, but it can track movements of your hand, and it can track them fairly accurately and fairly well. Now, there's a lot of people in the telemedicine space trying to get a piece of the pie, because everyone's sort of getting excited about telemedicine, going, oh, this is going to revolutionize healthcare. and there's surely a lot of money in that. And so what you get is a lot of people who build their own system. So they go, okay, I'm going to engineer a device and it's going to do all of the things that a stroke patient needs, and the price point's going to be about $1,000. If anyone contacts me and says, hey, can I purchase this and work with my patient population, they'll say, yes, wait 6 months while we build all of your units, and here's 20, please don't ask us for 1,000. In my opinion, that is, maybe I'm just lazy, but that's just not going to solve the problem. That's not a scalable enough solution for the problem that we have right now. So whenever in my department, whenever we come up with a device that we think, hey, this actually might help a patient population, it needs to, make it through a series of pretty simple tests. One, can I get it on Amazon Prime? Can I click and have it arrive at my door within a couple of days in bulk? That's the first, or something thereabouts. It may not have to be Amazon Prime, but something around that. 2, is it cheap? And 3, does it come with a software developer kit? So can I get my software guys to just play with it, break it, do whatever they need to do to actually make it be useful for the population we're trying to serve? Because off-the-shelf solutions that are currently out there, they're exciting, they're interesting, but for the most part, they usually don't work with the population unless you tweak them a little bit. So then I teamed up with a couple of kids out of City College of New York, and they have a business called Jess Therapy, and it's gesture-based physical therapy, and they made a video game. And it's a really simple video game. You move your hand over the leap motion, and you've got to steer this plane through the rings on the screen. And it trains a whole bunch of movements that stroke patients have trouble with. Stroke patients have trouble with flexion extension. They're usually locked in this position here, and they can't move their hand up. This stops them from being able to do all sorts of, movements that are important for personal care, like brushing their hair or things like that. They also have movements with pronation supination, problems with pronation supination, rotation of the forearm. This stops them from doing things like opening jars, opening doors, and so we set up the game to train all of the movements that stroke patients have trouble with their upper limb. And then we tested it out. We're scientists, so we took 10 subjects, and they were around 70 years of age. We made sure that they had a diagnosis of stroke in the population we were interested in helping were a population of stroke patients that we were told could not be helped. So post 6 months. So these people had at least 6 months ago had a stroke. Now their insurance had run out because rehabilitation doesn't help after 6 months. They're sitting at home receiving no care. And we said, the first study, we're not interested in actually, we don't have a lot of money to bring them in and have them go through a rigorous program. So the first thing we're interested in is not so much efficacy, we're interested in feasibility. Do they enjoy playing the game? Can a 70-year-old stroke patient with their primary caregiver, which is usually their spouse, who is usually also around that age, can they set up a tablet? Can they set up the technology? Are they happy with it? And so then, in terms of playing the game, we got them in for 6 weeks of therapy, three sessions per week, and 30 minutes per session. Now, again, because we're scientists, we wanted to have a control group. So we have a really great robotic rehab facility at Burke. And so we got 10 patients, we matched them for age, we matched them for diagnosis, we matched them for upper limb ability. And again, because we didn't have much funding, we had to piggyback this control group on an ongoing study. So we actually didn't get to control the intensity. So the people that were using this robotic rehab device, which by the way costs about $300,000 per robot, were receiving double the intensity of our therapy. Now, the first thing that was really awesome was that our patients showed good usability. So we're using a system usability score, which is a very well used, reliable, valid user experience questionnaire, and our patients did well. From the scores that we saw, we were satisfied that for the most part, most of our patients would be able to set it up and independently sit and play the game. And for the record, by the end of the 6 weeks, they were most of our patients were running into the clinic, setting their things up and going for it. The clinicians could use it as well. That's important. Some clinicians don't like technology, so we had to make sure that all our PTs and OTs were happy with the tech. Then we ran a physical activity enjoyment scale. How much did you enjoy playing the game? And this is where we started to get really exciting responses, because for the most part, they enjoyed playing the game, and we were happy about that. They would rather do this than conventional therapy, which was a nice thing to hear. The other thing that was really huge was there was no correlation between physical activity enjoyment and ability level. This is not usually seen in stroke rehab. Usually in stroke rehab, if you're really severely affected by your stroke, you don't enjoy doing rehab because it's hard, and we don't like doing hard things as a race. And so the fact that this game automatically calibrated to their ability level, so if they could only move this much, they could still play the game as effectively and as well as someone who could move this much. So there was no correlation. So that was really exciting for us. And then the real exciting thing, which no doctor should have to tell you, but there's no literature supporting this, is that we found a really strong, significant correlation between how much you enjoyed playing the video game and how much you improved from playing the video game. So linking actual user enjoyment to functional outcome following stroke is really important, because the current model for physical therapy following stroke, and I'm allowed to say this because I'm a physical therapist, is appalling. You sort of sit there and you say, okay, do 100 reps of this movement. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, good. You know, and the therapist isn't engaged, the patient isn't engaged. You're not really getting an idea for why they're doing what they're doing, and things don't go so well. So in terms of our efficacy outcomes, we were really stunned to see that patients improved. This group of patients who could not be helped were helped by therapy. They weren't helped as much as by the robot therapy, but remember, the robot therapy is double the intensity and 1,000 times the cost, and also not mobile, so you can't take it home with you. So we were really encouraged by this first study that we're doing, and so we're excited to be moving on with this study. We're currently pulling in funding to take this out into the home, to give 20 patients a little tablet-based system that they can play for as much as they want for 6 weeks, and see how that improves their outcome. And we're also we're sort of soliciting the NIH-funded StrokeNet initiative, which is a nationwide clinical trial initiative where once we've shown efficacy in a small population, which we've already done, we can now amplify that to about 10 different stroke centers around the country and get lots of patients playing this video game. So we're really excited to move that forward. But it's not all about treatment, it's also about assessment. So another thing that's really difficult about treating neurological disorders and general balance disorders and just all sorts of the problems that we face in an aging population is that we're not really assessing people very effectively. So again, when I look at the way that trained clinicians assess stroke patients, the most widely used upper limb functional scale is called the Fugl-Meyer, and you sit there and you go, okay, move your wrist up as much as you can, and the patient tries to move their wrist, and the therapist looks at that and goes, okay, that's about 10 degrees, and then another therapist will look at that and go, yeah, that's about 15 degrees, and I'm, it sounds like a joke, but it's not a joke. This is actually what's being done, because it's too time consuming to sit with a person and actually get a very accurate representation of what they're doing. And the problem with that is then you can't really gauge if your treatment had any effect. And so then you start to see all sorts of therapists branching out into weird and wacky disciplines of stroke therapy where no one can agree on what the best approach is, and the people who suffer are the patients. So we're proposing at Burke, you're nothing without a good acronym, so we've got a fantastic acronym. This thing called SNAP that we're calling, it's a Scalable Neurological Assessment Platform. The idea is you get a whole bunch of low-cost electronics, consumer electronics that are being used in the gaming world quite a bit. You roll it out on a little cart and you put it in front of the patient sits down, performs a bunch of different assessments, and based on the customized software that we've developed, we get a very detailed snapshot of how this person is doing in that one moment when you take a look at it. And then you can compare them in 2 weeks, and in 3 weeks, and in 4 weeks, and start to not only understand how this person is going as an individual, but start to run predictive models on these data and prognose what we can hope for their recovery in the future. And so what you've got here is Jeremy Hill, who's one of our brilliant programmers, engineers, just all-round geniuses, sitting at our Snap station. You can see this funny thing on his head. That's a DSI 24 headset, which is a dry EEG headset, so recording brain activity from him, but ultimately from a stroke survivor. We've got a Microsoft Kinect 2 that's tracking his motion, so you can see him in this weird DJ pose, but it's actually tracking what he's doing. It's tracking his hand as well with the leap motion. And then this little green dot here is, we've got a Tobii iX, which is a $150 eye tracker that is tracking where his eyes are looking on the screen. And so the Microsoft Kinect, in case you guys aren't familiar with it, is you can pick it up for about $200. It does whole body motion capture, and it's actually fairly accurate. So we've got a really high-end motion capture system in my lab, and we cross-validate everything we do with the high-end motion capture system. The Microsoft Kinect holds up really well. It can, my motion capture system can pinpoint marker locations. It's a marked motion capture system. It can pinpoint marker locations to about 800 microns. And the marker locations that the Kinect is inferring are usually no more than 5 centimeters away from where my high-end motion capture system is inferring. So we've got really high accuracy with this thing. So what can you do with that? Well, when you get to pair, when you get to work around with really fancy mathematics people like I do, you can start running the data that the Kinect is automatically connecting. You can start streaming that into an analytics pipeline that starts to cluster your data based on behavioral observations that the algorithm is making, saying, so what we did here was falls is a huge problem in the elderly. Elderly people are, it's one of the leading causes of comorbidities and one of the leading causes of hospitalizations. We still don't have a really good way to predict who's going to fall and who's not going to fall. We've got a system called the Burke balance scale, which is, once again, you guessed it, subjective. Very big error bars depending on which clinician is making the assessment and how well they're trained. And so, don't take anything you see here for gospel, because this is pilot. This is a single subject, single trial design. But this is me going from sitting to standing. Just on a regular day. This is me going from sitting to standing after a few beers, shortly after I took this. And we ran it through the clustering algorithm, what we were doing is similar to principal component analysis, if anyone's familiar with that. But what you can see is that we can very clearly differentiate between when I'm doing something in a balanced way and when I'm doing something in an unbalanced way. So we're currently deploying this system out to spinal cord injured patients, elderly, and Parkinsonian patients to see if we can actually start to predict who's going to fall and who's not going to fall and prevent injury. So I'm actually going to skip this. This is an eye tracking thing, but I've only got 5 minutes. So I'll just move along and just say that we get to work with really cool partners. We get to do all sorts of awesome stuff. We work with Bull HighPerformance because we believe that what we're doing is not rehabilitation, we're improving performance. Whether it's at one end of the spectrum or at the other end of the spectrum, you should not be compromising the techniques that you're using to improve performance. So we try and take things that we learn from the high performance world and bring it into the rehab world. And so, we're actively recruiting programmers and gamers and hackers and anyone who is interested in using their skills to come up with something cool. We're interested in hearing from you. And so I just want to finish off with, the last speaker was talking about permission. I'm talking about being permissionless, permissionless innovation. This is something, my favorite title that I hold is, I'm called the chief mad scientist of a group called Not Impossible. And we get to take all of the ideas that I've been throwing around so far, and we get to just use them to help people that need help right now, as opposed to this sort of very rigorous scientific process of, okay, I'm going to do this and now I'm going to do that, and once I validate that, I'm going to, then I'm going to sort of publish a few papers and show the world. At Not Impossible, we just say, forget all of that. There's a whole group of people who are in really, dire straits, and they need help, and we can help. And so Not Impossible all started with a guy called Tempt One, who was an LA-based graffiti artist, and Tempt was given a diagnosis of ALS. He lost, within about 3 years, he lost complete control of his body, and he was unable to communicate. He was communicating using a word board. And the company Tobii, which does eye tracking technology, who are also the devil, said, oh yeah, $30,000 for an eye tracking device. So, so this guy had already become a ward of the state because his family couldn't afford the nursing care. They were paying, on top of that, they were paying $7,000 a month to get him around the clock nursing care, because that's actually what keeps an ALS patient alive, is being able to pay for the extra nursing care to make sure they don't aspirate in their sleep and make sure they don't suffocate and so on and so forth. And so $30,000 really wasn't going to happen. So Mick Ebeling, who's the founder of Not Impossible, pulled together a group of us hackers and programmers and just people who wanted to help, and created something called the Eyewriter. It was a crappy pair of sunglasses from the Venice Beach Pier with a webcam mounted to it via a coat hanger. And it tracked Tempt's movements, and it allowed him to use an automated speller, and it allowed him to start drawing again and creating graffiti and creating art, which is now up in museums all around the world. And it costs $20. So, $20, $30,000. And Not Impossible's intention isn't really to create something that can be sold. It's to show people, hey, you can do this, and then move on to the next thing. And so, after this happened, you started to see a crazy disruption in the area about, oh, actually eye trackers don't need to cost this much. And now there's the Tobii IX, which costs $150. There's the iTribe, which costs $99. And so it's sort of, we started working on this idea of technology for the sake of humanity. How can we use things to help? So I'm going to finish up with a video, because I know I'm well out of time. But this is a project called Don's Voice that we've worked on.
And in birth, in sickness and in health.
I think the first year you still did pretty much everything. He was diagnosed in March of '95.
Hi.
Hi, Daddy.
Merry Christmas.
And that whole crop year you worked. He worked with his dad still then.
Hi, Daddy.
Hi.
He's constantly losing abilities every week. Like what he could do last week, he can't do this week, and next week you know it's going to be something else, but you don't know what. He actually was a really good learning experience for me. He taught me a lot, like how to change the oil in the lawnmower, like how to do the books for the farm, and how to take on the responsibilities that he used to do.
That's all.
I'm not even sure if he realized that he wouldn't be able to speak, but I remember explaining that to him. Yeah, if you do go on the ventilator, you're not going to be able to speak anymore. At that point, it was very difficult. I was listening to the CBC radio, and I heard Mick Ebeling being interviewed about the Eyewriter.
My name is Mick Eveling, founder of Not Impossible Labs. Everything that we stand for is this concept of technology for the sake of humanity. How do you take something and modify it, break it, adapt it in some way so it accomplishes maybe something that wasn't intended to do, but it accomplishes a fundamental human need that someone has. As soon as I found out about Don Lorraine, I knew that Not Impossible had to give Don his voice back. H-I-J.
My name is Javid Gangji, and I'm an engineer and a volunteer for Not Impossible Labs.
The goal of the device was to create something that actually allowed Don to speak audibly with his family and be able to communicate more independently.
But you have to remember that he's never used a computer before. So he was diagnosed in 1995.
So he missed that whole era of really accessible personal computers and cell phones.
Don's never touched a computer. Like he doesn't even know how to turn one on.
So when I went there the first time, I went with this fancy software and the fancy device, and he just said, "I'm sorry, I can't do this." So I had to think about the way he communicated for the last 15 years. I asked Lorraine to send me his letter sheet.
So the letterboard is a piece of paper with the alphabet written on it in 4 quadrants. So you can tell if you hold the letterboard in front of his face which corner he's looking at by where his eyes are.
And that's exactly what I'm doing in my program. Looping through the letters, and when he's ready, he looks to the middle, and voila, his word's there.
It's not as convenient and fast as this.
Yeah.
For sure.
Exactly.
But I mean, it's developing, so who knows where it'll go.
We'll get it. Eventually, we'll get it. A year ago, I made Don a promise. That I will find an answer that works for him specifically.
Really, mainly, we want to help Javid to be able to develop this so he can help other people. That's the main motivation.
He'll be looking there. He's not looking there.
I love you, Lorraine.
When I look at Don, that could be me. That could be my uncle. That could be my dad. What right do I have to do nothing about it? I just didn't imagine you flying with it the way you did, and that's just, it's just amazing. Mm-hmm. Clearly you have things to say, so.
The goal of the project was to give Don his voice back and give him more of his independence.
He's typing at over 2.5 words a minute. And once he's typing at say 3 or 4 words a minute, at that point you're actually talking full conversation.
We've created something for Don that has given him this sense of independence, and now everybody has access to this. This is this simple piece of technology that is going to be so liberating for people around the world.
My dear Lorraine, I can't imagine life without you. You have made the last 25 years fly by and the last 20 with ALS more bearable. I am looking forward to the next 25 years. Love, Don.
So that's Don's voice, which we've now made that software available open source to people, and we're trying to sort of work out how to. It's still not mum and dad proof, it's still not anyone can get it and set it up, but we're working on ways to make that happen. And just finally, we're the next iteration of this project is the Brainwriter, which is. The branding guys say, from blink to think. We're trying to, for even more locked-in individuals, we're trying to use EEG to create a binary communication device. I've got a video, but I won't show it, but we're demonstrating this at the Smithsonian in 2 weeks. So I will be up on stage demonstrating a binary EEG classifier, so pray for me. All of this doesn't happen in a vacuum. There's so many people that help, so thanks a lot, guys.